Is the GOP obsessed with outlawing abortion? The country is witnessing an unprecedented wave of abortion restrictions. But this anti-abortion rights platform didn't pop up suddenly. The GOP has had to be patient, strategic, and aggressive in their tactics, and occasionally say things like this.
I've noticed that everybody that is for abortion has already been born.
Wow, thanks for that groundbreaking insight, Mr. President. I'm going to break down why the GOP embraced abortion as a core policy and how we ended up with so many abortion restrictions. First, it may come as a surprise, but the GOP and their supporters weren't always against abortion rights. 3 years after Roe v. Wade, a landmark Supreme Court case that made abortion legal in the United States was decided, public opinion polls actually showed that, on average, Republican voters supported abortion rights more than Democrats.
Well, historically, neither party was really pro-choice or pro-life, and there were politicians in either party who could be found in each camp. So there were lots of Catholic pro-life Democrats, like presidential candidate Joe Biden at one time opposed abortion.
Republican First Lady Betty Ford called Roe v. Wade a great decision. And Republican Vice President Nelson Rockefeller had campaigned for abortion rights in New York. Even the chair of the Republican National Committee was pro-abortion rights. Despite this, in the mid-70s, something started to happen in the GOP.
3 or 4 years after Roe v. Wade was passed, the GOP was definitely moving toward a more anti-abortion position. So the GOP Republican platform in 1976, for example, had some language about supporting the efforts of people who wanted to ban abortion through a constitutional amendment.
Abortion really started becoming a core issue for the GOP when this guy got into office.
Is an unborn child a human being? I happen to believe it is.
It really changed in 1980. In part, that was because Ronald Reagan was the first candidate to really make abortion a major issue. He was trying to capitalize on something that I think Richard Nixon had identified earlier in the 70s, which was that there were lots of traditionally Democratic voters. These were often Catholics or evangelical Protestants who were blue collar, may have been part of a union, generally voted for Democrats because they thought the Democrats fought for the little guy. And Reagan thought that those voters could be peeled off if people in the GOP appealed to their views on issues like abortion.
Fortunately for Reagan, his presidency coincided with another movement gaining momentum.
This was also significantly the time when the religious right was mobilizing, so you began to see groups like the Moral Majority trying to bring evangelical Protestants into politics in a way that really hadn't been true before. So the GOP thought it would be important to present itself as the GOP put it, as the party of life.
The GOP's appeal to social conservatives like conservative Catholics and evangelicals kept growing, and both the party's leadership and base began to change. By 2009, only 12% of self-identifying Republicans supported abortion in all circumstances. Now, all the new abortion restrictions passed in 2019 are actually the outcome of a legal fight that intensified during the Obama presidency, specifically the 2010 state legislature elections. In 2010, 2 years after Obama became president, over 1,000 state Senate seats and almost 5,000 state House seats were up for re-election.
2010 was a huge Republican wave year, and a lot of that could have been predicted in advance. Simply put, a lot of Democrats were under the belief that because they'd elected Barack Obama in 2008, maybe they didn't have to show up at the polls in 2010.
The GOP was victorious. In fact, they did so well, they literally made history. The sweep gave Republicans their largest number of seats since the Great Depression. They flipped 20 chambers. That means either a state's House or a state's Senate went from blue to red. By the end of election night, they had seized control of the entire legislature, so both a state's House and a state's Senate in 25 states. One state they gained full control over was Alabama.
I would actually trace this back to 2008, when Democrats had a huge year, elected Barack Obama president, and took over the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House. A lot of people thought that the Democrats in this country were going to ride a wave of changing American demographics to become the majority party here for a generation to come. And it didn't exactly turn out that way, did it? This is because Republicans realized that the 2010 elections could be much more consequential, even historic.
Why historic? Because the year that the state legislative elections took place was the same year that the census was undertaken. Once every 10 years after the latest census, states redraw the boundaries of their legislative districts. And that's a big deal. In 2010, political strategist Karl Rove wrote an op-ed that was subtitled, "He who controls redistricting can control Congress." And guess who controls redistricting in most states? State legislatures.
What the Republicans understood was that control of state legislatures, these most important chambers in a state as far as a state house, a state senate, the most local level of representation, is important because those people also draw the congressional lines in this country. Republicans thought all of this through. None of this was by accident. They realized that these changing American demographics left them with the potential of being locked out of power around the country for a long time to come. And they saw the opportunity that redistricting presented for them.
Of course, gerrymandering, meaning to draw boundaries in a way that favors a specific party, has been occurring since like the early 19th century, and both Democrats and Republicans are guilty of it. But after Republicans swept the 2010 elections, they were in prime position to readjust the boundaries to favor the GOP.
Republicans thought about redistricting in 2010 in terms of seats at the table. And what they wanted to do was control every single one of those seats. Ordinarily, if you control the state house, the state senate, or the governor's office, you have a seat at the table. You are inside the room when these maps are being drawn. What Republicans did was they took control of every single seat and they locked the Democrats outside of the room. Democrats didn't see this coming because this wasn't the way it had worked in the past. They had almost always controlled one of those branches, so they never had to worry about being completely on the outside. Republicans changed the very paradigm. They shifted the entire way folks think about redistricting. And as a result, our politics has not been the same ever since.
And that's where you start drawing a connection between gerrymandering and abortion laws.
There's a straight line between gerrymandering and these extreme abortion bills. Just look at a state like Georgia, for example. So Georgia had a statewide election in 2018 for governor, and it was extraordinarily close. There were only 55,000 votes separating the Democrat and the Republican. So you would, safely look at this and say, this is a pretty competitive and equally divided state. The trouble is, it's not that equally divided.
Georgia Republicans outnumbered Democrats by 30 seats in the state House and 14 seats in the state Senate.
So there was a poll taken by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and it found that 70% of the state backed Roe versus Wade. They did not want to see any legislation in Georgia that would undo the abortion protections guaranteed by Roe versus Wade. But Georgia's legislature advanced those restrictions anyway. They didn't have to worry about this. And gerrymandering is one of the reasons why.
Republicans now had the power to take the next step in their abortion fight, restrict abortion access itself. Between 2011 and 2016, states enacted over 300 restrictions on abortions, which accounted for 30% of all abortion restrictions since Roe v. Wade. Just look at this graph showing the number of abortion restrictions enacted per year. Look at the year Roe v. Wade was decided, and then look how the number spikes in 2011, the year after Republicans swept the state legislatures.
So in 2010, you saw the mobilization in the United States of what was called the Tea Party movement. Tea Party Republicans were almost uniformly very strongly opposed to abortions, and they took over tons of state legislatures after 2010 and then passed really an unprecedented number of abortion restrictions after they took office.
God bless America.
While states were not directly challenging the legality of abortion, they made it harder for many people to get one.
Well, so there are a lot of different strategies that they've used. You see one strategy unfolding in Missouri right now, where there's only one remaining clinic that the state is very likely to no longer license, which would mean there would be no abortion clinics in the state of Missouri. Another strategy would be to sort of put barriers in the place of women who are seeking abortions, like waiting periods, or laws denying funding for abortion, or other things that would make either abortion more unpleasant to get or more inconvenient to get.
According to a Bloomberg analysis, clinics that provide abortions have been closing at a record pace. Between 2011 and 2016, 162 clinics closed nationwide, while only 21 opened. So, as the GOP severely restricts access to abortion, segments of the anti-abortion rights movement see their final goal, overturning Roe v. Wade, within arm's reach, mainly because the Supreme Court now has a conservative majority. However, the anti-abortion rights movement might be too optimistic. In May 2019, the Supreme Court blocked Indiana's request to reinstate a ban on abortions based on disability, gender, or race. It may be a sign that the court is not eager to fully dismantle Roe v. Wade yet. But even if the Supreme Court decides not to hear challenges to Roe v. Wade, there's no sign that the GOP intends to slow down erosion of abortion access. And there's no sign that the traditionally Libertarian Party has any plans of breaking up with its anti-abortion rights base.